Welcome everyone to our latest edition of our NCAA Social Series. I'm Andy Katz. Pleased to be joined by three presidents. Jerry Morehead, he is the president of the University of Georgia. Bulldogs, of course, had a major win the other night in Indianapolis to win the national championship over Alabama in the SEC. He's also the chair of the Division I Board of Directors. Dr. Stephen Shirley, he's the president of Minot State and the chair of the Division II President's Council, and a return guest, Dr. Fannie Miller. She is the president of Hamlin, and she's the chair of the Division III President's Council. I want to start off our conversation with the convention next week in Indianapolis. Obviously, major changes are afoot, and I will start with you, Jerry. Why now?
Well, I think we've gone through a long and deliberative process with our Constitution Committee under the able leadership of former Defense Secretary Robert Gates. And we recognize that our membership is ready for change. And this document that has been worked on for many, many months and has gone through several iterations is the vehicle by which we can ultimately bring about transformative change in the NCAA.
You know, I would echo that and just add that, you know, now is the time that I think society writ large expects this from us. I think external pressures that are out there expect this from us. I think we ourselves within the NCAA, the institutions, the conferences, the colleges and universities, our fans, our supporters expect some change. And so I absolutely applaud the work that's gone into this over the last 6 months. And we're getting towards that really important vote next week, as you referenced, and now is absolutely the time to act.
Well, why now? Is because the NCAA today is not what it was 25 years ago. The Constitution that was written in 1996 reflects a reality that is no longer the reality of today. It does not include the voice of students, and it was time to recognize that students need to play a more prominent role in the NCAA. So it was time to take a look at what we're doing and change what we're doing, but it also the pressures that are out there that's impacting the NCAA and how we operate. It's important that we take control of our future, we take control of our destiny and not leave it to someone else. So the time was now to do it. Given everything that's going on, it's important that we lead the effort, not someone else.
So one thing that I think a lot of people in the outside world sometimes forget that this is not, from an athletic side, it's not a professional league. There isn't a union of players, and there isn't a commissioner. And yet we still have to just drill that down. And that within Division III, II, I, there are so many different institutions, different missions, different budgets. And yet in the past, to your point, Dr. Miller, it had been almost as if here is one size fits all. At what point, Dr. Miller, and I'll start with you and we can go around if you don't mind, Dr. Shirley and Jerry, if you could piggyback here, when did you notice that there needed to be a change from the status quo?
Well, I think we've noticed for some time that it needed to happen. But I think with NIL, it pushed us to think a little differently, a little faster than I think we were ready, even though we knew we needed to change. So I think NIL really pushed us in a direction to step back and take a look that we need to do something very different because the rules as they currently exist, we're not reflecting the needs of our students very well.
You know, I don't know that I can identify one specific point in time. I think Dr. Miller's spot on there with the impact that NIL had. I think, you know, other just societal things going on around us, whether that's technological changes with, you know, social media and various impacts that can have on how folks are communicating with one another and different relationships that can create, transfer rules and policies with students student athletes. Obviously, there's been some significant changes there in the last few years. Just really an accumulation of a number of things. And I think we frankly got to a tipping point, and whether that tipping point was, in July of 2021 or June of 2021 or when that may have been, but clearly a lot of different things were starting to mount. And, it's just a reality of keeping up with the times and not, continuing to work with a document that was a quarter of a century old and recognizing it is time, and now is the time.
From Division I perspective, I think we've been overtaken by a number of events, and the NCAA in its current structure just has too many layers of bureaucracy, and it's too hard for the current structure to respond to those events. And as Dr. Miller pointed out, NIL is a great example of our inability to quickly respond to a situation that has become increasingly challenging. You can't pick up a newspaper or read a story online where there isn't another controversial issue related to NIL. And we don't really have mechanisms that allow us to easily and quickly address those issues. Enforcement problems at the Division I level has become something that has created great frustration among our membership as how long those proceedings go on and the varying results that we see. And that isn't a negative reflection on the enforcement staff. They're all great people that do great work, but they're bound by, a rule book that is often cumbersome and difficult to interpret. And so I think we all saw this as an opportunity to begin a process of streamlining our organization, having fewer rules, but making sure the important rules are followed and enforced, and making sure at the end that we're focused on our student athletes.
So to that point, let's shift to the process, because, it's hard, like within the SEC, to get 14 schools to agree, let alone 350 schools in Division I, and then add all the schools in D2 and D3 to agree on something. So with that as the backdrop, Jerry, I'll start with you now. What do you see as the process of ensuring that the new constitution gets passed and that we have a new NCAA?
Well, I give a lot of credit to the folks that put this NCAA Constitution Committee together because it had a variety of perspectives, individuals with expertise in areas that were important to the deliberation process, people that had experiences that could come to bear on creating this document. And as you know, it went through various iterations. It was published, there was comment, then there was more comment, modifications have been made. So I think the document that we currently have is maybe one that's not perfect from the perspective of a member in D1, D2, or D3, but it's a document that reflects collectively an effort to reach a consensus.
Yeah, I wasn't part of the Constitution Committee, so I wasn't privy to a lot of those conversations and so forth. But again, if you kind of take a look back to when we as a Board of Governors made the decision last summer to move forward with this plan to move forward with the new Constitution, You think about Chairman Gates and the members of that committee, and thinking about this last summer, it seemed like moving mountains. I mean, this is a major task, and in the time frame that we really thought was we needed to get this done, and the work that the committee did, and led by Chair Gates, and getting through that, and then getting to mid-November when we had the Constitution, the virtual convention on the Constitution, and each of the divisions having an opportunity to meet within their groups and association wide, and then a chance for feedback and for more reflection on that. And certainly there were some tweaks that were needed, and there were some changes, and there were some things that I think there was some good feedback coming out of that, and in the ensuing weeks, and then getting into December when we ultimately have gotten something ready now for January. We didn't get to mid-November at that convention, at that constitutional convention, and there wasn't, complete upheaval and saying, oh my gosh, this work, throw this out, you have to start all over. This is not, this was really on track. Some minor tweaking, some changes, some things that I think were important to bring forward. But I think that sort of was the proof in the pudding there, that my goodness, that was a lot of monumental work done in about 4 months time, my hats off to all of those folks, and to get us here. And again, I think it's also there's a real fine balance between moving, acting quickly, moving expediently, but not, completely in haste, doing it also that results in a product that's really high quality. And I think that's exactly that was the needle was threaded here. So it'll be exciting next week in Indianapolis, and to continue moving forward after that.
Serving on the committee, I will say it was a difficult process, but an amicable process. I think that all the divisions were looking for change and looking for how do we structure our own identity within the context of the NCAA. This Constitution allows us, each division, to structure its own identity within that context. I will have to say, if we think the work is done, it's not. We still have lots more work to do. And we have work to do, we're continuing to do up until the time of the vote. We had a Constitution Advisory Group that we put together from the beginning, D3 did. So we would get input along the way so that people wouldn't be surprised by some of the things that were coming out, so that we could begin to address the concerns that were there, knowing that some concerns, they were going to remain concerns because there was nothing we could do about it. However, there were other things that we could do that was, I think, in the Division III have been wanting for a long time. I spent the majority of my academic career in Division I. So now I'm in Division III. So I understand 1 and 3 in my own way. And what you notice immediately is that no, Jerry, I consider him a colleague in so many ways, but Division I has overshadowed 2 and 3. And so the public, when they see the NCAA, they only think there's Division I. They don't think that there's Division II and III. This Constitution for Division III allows us to have that identity, to support the other divisions, but also to do things that benefits our student athletes in the way in which we need it done. So, and I think that's true for 1 and 2. So I think we're hoping for the best. I'm really optimistic that this is going to pass, but the road has not been easy. But I'm really proud of the committee and the fact that we were colleagues in every sense of the word and worked together to get us to where we are. So I thank my colleagues for the work.
All right, so to that point, and I'm not expecting you to give me a full laundry list here, but if you can each, I just want to piggyback on what you said, the identity. I'll start with you again, Dr. Miller, and then we'll go 3, 2, 1 here. What should the identity be of Division III athletics?
Well, I think our identity has always been, and I'm not so sure it's different from 1 and 2. The identity has been focused on the student athlete. How do we ensure the best possible experience, not only in terms of athletics, but in terms of developing them as leaders that whether it's in the sport, in the area of athletics, or in whatever field they choose to locate themselves. So it's really making sure that we're helping to create people who are strong and committed and contributing members of a civil society. So our focus is always on how do we develop that student athlete in all the positive ways that we possibly can. So that's been the doing the best we can for the student athlete has been the identity for D1 and D3 and remains the identity for D3.
Yeah, the only thing I'd probably add to that, and maybe just a different way of saying it, but one of the things we really focus on in Division II is life in the balance, sort of this concept of having that fine balance between those student athletes, what they're able to do, both in the classroom and on the court or on the field or whatever it may be. And that balance really is important. It's important to our institutions, our 300 plus institutions in Division II, but it's also important to those student athletes. And beyond that, when you get onto the athletic experience, providing a absolute top-notch, high-quality championships experience, we focus a lot on the championships piece of things and ensuring that students have those kinds of high-level experiences as well. But and again, I think that a lot of that is reflected in the new Constitution, in the verbiage in the new Constitution, and in the hallmarks and the principles therein on that sort of life in the balance piece, on student mental health and wellness and well-being, and a lot of those important pieces, and also giving students more of a voice on the Board of Governors and some of those kinds of, I think, real, tangible, meaningful changes as well. So I see an awful lot within the new Constitution that I think fits in really nicely with the principles and hallmarks of all three of our divisions, but certainly for Division II in particular.
Oh, I agree with everything that Dr. Miller and Dr. Shirley have said. I would just add that the new Constitution is going to give each division the ability to develop a structure that allows its member institutions to achieve those goals that have been articulated, and to address some of the critical issues that have reached the forefront of college athletics in the last few years.
All right, last question here for each one of you. Put your crystal ball out here. We're going to go 5-10 years. I mean, what does Division III in the NCAA look like? Dr. Miller.
Oh my, that's a really hard question. A good question, but a hard question. I think that we are an autonomous body that has rules and expectations that are student-centered in every possible way.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've talked a lot about within Division II as we move forward here, and I think it has some immediate impact, but it also has some 5 and 10 year impact. Back to your crystal ball question, but one of the things that we really value coming forward with this new proposed Constitution is, again, the autonomy, some of the flexibility within Division I, II, and III to each create our own identity. But in Division II, and I don't want to speak for the others, but there are also an awful lot of services and things that come from the national office and that we rely heavily on, whether that's health and safety protocols. It's been really important the last couple of years through COVID. It's concussion research. You can go on and on down the list where they've got some wonderful expertise in Indianapolis at the national office. And so kind of that balance and being able to ensure we're continuing to have access to and to utilize those resources as well. And so sort of that fine balance. And I think that's going to take a little of time, to get to that point where it ends up at that really nice, happy medium that makes a lot of sense for Division II with that autonomy, but also still having access and utilizing those resources at the national office to benefit our student athletes.
Well, for Division I could answer that question easier next August, because we've named a Division I Transformation Committee. It will be under the leadership of SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey and Ohio University Athletic Director Julie Cromer. And that Transformation Committee's task will be to set out the new roadmap for Division I, assuming the Constitution passes next week. And they'll spend the next several months seeking input from all members of Division I and developing the framework and the future for Division I. So it would be premature for me to speculate at this point, but I think it will be a more efficient and a more responsive organization. That I am certain of.
There's one thing that's important to me, and I think important to my colleagues, is that we want to see the NCAA remain our parent organization.
Mm-hmm.
We see that as our anchor. Division III sees that as our anchor.
Well, and I appreciate you saying that, because I also thought what Dr. Shirley said is so true. And we've done so many shows on that, is like I said, the general public and the membership don't fully grasp all the things that occur sort of out of that Indianapolis office, like concussion research, like health and safety protocols, that may not necessarily be mandates, but certainly are suggested, advised, and they've done the legwork for then the institutions or the conferences to take that information going forward, because someone has to do that at some point. And that's my whole thing. You still need someone to do the work, even though you may want to go off on your own. So I agree with all of you on that, and I think that we're going to still see that anchor firmly planted in the ground. Well, I appreciate all of you, and next week is the NCAA convention. We'll have the show in person on the road in Indianapolis. So as always, you can go to ncaa.org/social series, where all our social series are archived. Stay safe, everyone.